Sometimes I wonder if my life would have turned out differently if my dad hadn't died that spring morning. I was only 6, but I remember it like it was yesterday. He was in the kitchen making pancakes, his Sunday tradition. He always shaped them into funny faces, making me giggle. Mom was setting the table, humming a tune I can't remember anymore. "Maddie, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," Dad called, waving his spatula like a magic wand. I laughed and jumped off the couch, leaving my favorite stuffed elephant behind, and ran toward him. That's when it happened. The spatula clattered to the floor. Dad clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain. Everything after that is a blur. Ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, Mom crying. And just like that, my father was gone. The house felt too big, too quiet. Mom grieved for weeks, but eventually she stopped crying. Then she met Eric at a support group for widowed parents. He was nice tall, with kind eyes and a patient smile. Within a year, they got married, and he moved in. I was still trying to adjust to having a new stepdad when Mom hit me with another surprise: she was pregnant. I was 8 when Liam was born, and that's when everything changed. Mom quit her job as a teacher. "Liam needs me," she'd say anytime someone asked about it. These early years are crucial. I wanted to ask if my early years had been crucial too, if I had needed her just as much, but the words stuck in my throat. Slowly, Mom's world shrank until it revolved entirely around Liam. She started forgetting to pack my school lunch, barely noticed when I was sick, and hardly ever asked about my day. "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry," she'd say when I mentioned being hungry at dinner. "I was so busy with Liam's doctor appointment today." It wasn't just once. It became normal, Eric noticed. I'd catch him watching Mom with a worried frown as she fussed over Liam, completely ignoring me. One evening, as I struggled with my math homework, he sat beside me. "You know, Maddie," he said quietly, helping me with a problem. "Sometimes people get so caught up in one thing, they forget to see what else is important." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, but his words stuck with me. As Liam grew older, the tension in our house became impossible to ignore. Eric tried to talk to Mom about her obsession with Liam, but she always got defensive. I remember one particular dinner when Liam was 5, absent-mindedly pushing his food around his plate while Mom hovered over him. "Sarah," Eric said, setting down his fork. "You need to let him do things on his own," Mom stiffened. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" Eric sighed. "That's not what You don't understand. Liam needs me." I clenched my fork. "I was young, too," I muttered under my breath. Nobody heard me. Things got worse when Eric suggested putting Liam in Little League. I was sitting on the stairs, pretending to do my homework, when I heard them arguing. "Absolutely not!" Mom's voice was shrill. "Do you know how dangerous baseball is? He could get hit by a ball. Twist his ankle, for God's sake, Sarah. He needs to experience life. You can't protect him from everything," but she wouldn't budge. Instead, she signed Liam up for art classes at the community center. He hated it. Quit after 3 sessions. Mom blamed the teacher. Meanwhile, Eric started spending more time with me. Maybe it was his way of balancing things, or maybe he just saw how badly I needed someone in my corner. He took me to my karate classes, sat through every session, and cheered louder than any other parent when I earned a new belt. While I thrived under Eric's attention, Liam became increasingly difficult. His room was always a mess, clothes and toys everywhere. And Mom would turn to me with that look I dreaded. "Maddie, be a dear and clean up Liam's room." It wasn't a request. It was an expectation. One day, Eric caught wind of it. "She's not his maid, Sarah," he said. "He needs to clean up after himself." Mom burst into tears. "I knew it," she sobbed. "You love her more than your own son." I watched Eric's face fall, saw the fight leave his eyes. He looked at me apologetically, then raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, have it your way." After that, he stopped arguing with Mom about Liam, but he never stopped being there for me. Sometimes, small comforts are all we have, and I clung to them like a lifeline. By the time I turned 14, I had learned to stop expecting anything from Mom. If I wanted lunch, I packed it myself. If I needed help with homework, I went to Eric. If I wanted someone to ask how my day was, well, I didn't bother wanting that anymore. Eric did his best to fill the gaps, but there were some things even he couldn't fix. Like the way Mom only ever seemed to have enough energy for Liam. He was 9 by then, and his tantrums weren't cute anymore. But that didn't stop Mom from coddling him like he was still a baby. If he didn't want to eat dinner, she made him something else. If he threw a fit over chores, she did them for him. If he got a bad grade, she blamed the teacher. It was exhausting to watch. One day, I came home to find Liam sprawled on the couch, video game controller in hand, an empty juice box on the floor next to him. The kitchen sink was overflowing with dishes, and Mom was in her usual spot beside him, eyes glued to her phone. Liam, can you take the trash out? I asked, already knowing what was coming. He didn't even look up. No, I sighed. Mom? She blinked at me like she'd forgotten I existed. Oh, just do it for him, Maddie. He's had a long day. I looked at Liam. His biggest struggle today had probably been deciding which game to play. Eric came home just as I was tying up the garbage bag. He took one look at me, then at Liam, then at Mom. Liam, take the trash out. Liam groaned dramatically. Why? Maddie's already doing it. Eric's jaw tightened. Because you live here too, and you need to help out. Liam turned to Mom, his default strategy when someone dared to suggest he should lift a finger. Mom? Mom set her phone down, eyes narrowing at Eric. Why are you picking on him? Eric let out a breath, like he was counting to 10 in his head. I'm not picking on him, Sarah. I'm trying to teach him responsibility. He's a child. He's 9. He's sensitive. He's lazy, I muttered under my breath. Mom's head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. Don't talk about your brother that way. Eric took the garbage bag from my hands and thrust it at Liam. Take it out. Now. Liam pouted but took the bag, dragging his feet the whole way. That was the night the fights between Eric and Mom started getting worse. He really did, but Mom refused to see what was happening. She'd get defensive, accuse him of not loving Liam enough, of not understanding him. Eventually, Eric stopped pushing. And just like that, Liam won. By the time I was 16, I had a countdown on my phone. 2 more years, 2 more years and I could leave. Eric was the only thing keeping me sane. He took me to college visits, helped me with SAT prep, and told me about the savings account he'd started for me. But I wasn't the only one counting down. Eric was tired. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped after a long day of work, in the way he hesitated before stepping into the house like he was bracing himself for whatever nonsense waited inside. Mom and Liam were a united front now, and Eric was the enemy. One night, I found him sitting in his truck in the driveway, engine off, staring at the dashboard. I knocked on the window. He startled, then rolled it down. You okay? I asked. He forced a smile. Just needed a minute. I leaned against the truck. You ever think about leaving? Eric sighed, rubbing his face. Every damn day. I nodded. Me too. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us thinking about the same thing. By the time I was 18, Eric and I barely spoke to Mom and Liam unless we had to. It wasn't worth the fight. The day I graduated, Eric was front and center, cheering louder than anyone. Mom came too, but she spent most of the ceremony texting, probably checking in on Liam. Later that night, Eric pulled me aside. I've been saving up, he said, handing me a folder full of college brochures. You can go anywhere you want, Maddie. Sky's the limit. Before I could respond, Mom burst into the room. You can't be serious, she snapped. That money should be for Liam. He's going to need it more. Eric's face hardened. This is non-negotiable, Sarah. I already made my decision. Mom looked at me like I had personally betrayed her. You're really going to let him do this? I didn't hesitate. Yes, she scoffed. Fine, go. But don't expect us to come running when you need something. I smiled. I won't. And for the first time in years, I felt free. College was everything I had dreamed of: independence, opportunity, peace. I still called home once a week, but I only ever talked to Eric. Mom was always too busy, and Liam never bothered to pick up the phone. The updates I got weren't surprising. Liam was struggling in school. Liam refused to get a job. Liam got caught drinking, but it wasn't his fault. Mom, of course, defended him at every turn. One day, during a call with Eric, I finally asked, "Why do you stay?" Eric was quiet for a moment. Because of you, he admitted. But now that you're gone, he sighed. I don't know. That was the first time I let myself consider the possibility that one day he might leave too. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. 4 years later, I had my degree, a job, and an apartment of my own. I still kept in touch with Eric, but my calls home were rare. Liam, now 20, had done exactly nothing with his life. No job, no college, just video games and mom's endless excuses. Then, one day, Eric called. His voice was heavy. "I'm leaving, Maddie." I sat up straighter. "What?" "I can't do it anymore." I exhaled slowly. "Where will you go?" He hesitated. "I was thinking, maybe West Virginia, closer to you." Something warm spread through my chest. "I'd like that." He chuckled, but there was sadness in it. "Guess we're both finally free, huh?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I guess we are." But deep down, I knew something he didn't. Mom would never let us go that easily. And I had a feeling the worst was yet to come. When Eric left, I thought Mom would finally wake up. Maybe she'd realize she had driven away the one person who actually cared about her, the only one still holding things together. I was wrong. Instead of reflecting, she doubled down. "He abandoned us," she said bitterly when I called to check in. "After everything I did for him. After everything he promised. I should have known he'd walk away." I didn't bother arguing. Eric had hung on for far longer than most people would have. "What about Liam?" I asked instead. Mom let out a long sigh, like she was carrying the weight of the world. "He's taking it hard." "He loved Eric, you know." I resisted the urge to laugh. Liam barely acknowledged Eric unless he needed something. "And what's he doing now?" "He's figuring things out." I could practically hear the excuses forming. "Mom, he's 20. He needs a job." She bristled. "Not everyone moves through life as fast as you. Liam just needs time." I let it go. There was no point in pushing, but a few months later, I got a call that proved just how wrong she was. It was late past midnight when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Almost. The second I picked up, her voice hit me like a slap. Panicked. High-pitched. "Maddie, you need to come home. Now." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "It's Liam. He's in trouble." Of course he was. I rubbed my temples. "What kind of trouble?" Mom hesitated. "He was arrested." Silence. I sat up in bed. "What?" "They're saying it was theft, but it's a misunderstanding. He just got mixed up with the wrong crowd." "Where is he?" "They're holding him overnight. Bail is $5,000. I exhaled slowly. "Do you have it?" She scoffed. "Of course not. You know things have been tight since Eric left." And there it was. "You want me to pay?" "Maddie, please. He's your brother." I shut my eyes. This wasn't my problem. Not anymore. But no matter how much I tried to separate myself from the past, a small part of me, the part that had spent years wishing Mom would finally see me, still wanted to be the good daughter. So, like an idiot, I wired her the money, and that was my mistake, because after that, the floodgates opened. The next few months were a cycle of desperation and guilt-tripping. Mom started calling weekly, then daily. Each time it was something new. The electric bill is overdue. The car needs repairs. Liam has an opportunity, but he needs a little support. I helped at first, sent what I could, but the more I gave, the more they took. Until one day, I checked my bank account and realized I was barely saving anything. That was my wake-up call. I called Mom. "This has to stop," she sighed dramatically. "Maddie, the first wouldn't ask if we weren't struggling. You wouldn't be struggling if Liam got a job." Silence. "Then you have no idea how hard things have been for him," I laughed bitterly. "No, Mom, I do. Because you've been making excuses for him his whole life." She sniffed. "I don't know when you got so cruel." Click. That was the last time I answered her calls. But she wasn't done with me yet. It was a Sunday morning when I got the email. Subject, urgent. "Please call me." I almost deleted it without reading. But something told me to look. The message was short. "Maddie, I need to see you. Please. It's important." Mom, I stared at the words for a long time. I should have ignored it. Instead, I replied, "Fine. I'll come by next weekend." And just like that, I was walking back into the house I had spent years trying to escape. The place looked like a ghost of what it once was. The lawn was overgrown, the paint on the shutters peeling. I knocked, and after a few moments, Mom opened the door. She'd aged. Deep wrinkles. Dark circles under her eyes. Her once pristine hair was streaked with gray. "Come in," she said. I stepped inside, and the staleness of the air hit me. The house smelled like dust and old coffee. The furniture was the same, but everything felt smaller. Liam was on the couch, gaming, barely acknowledging my presence. I turned to Mom. "What do you want?" She wrung her hands. "Maddie, I need your help." "Here we go." I folded my arms. "With what?" She took a deep breath. "I need money," I laughed. "I couldn't help it." "Of course you do." She flinched. "It's not just for me, it's for the house. We're behind on the mortgage. If we don't catch up, we could lose it." I looked around. The house that had never really felt like mine. "And Liam?" Mom hesitated. "He's looking for work." Liam snorted from the couch. I turned to him. "Are you?" He finally looked at me, smirking. "What's it to you?" I shook my head. "Unbelievable." Mom grabbed my arm, her voice pleading. "Please, Maddie." The first wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I sighed. "How much?" $1,500 a month. Just for a little while. I felt the weight of those words. For a little while. That was the lie she had been telling herself for years. I should have walked away. Instead, I said, "I'll think about it." And that was my second mistake. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my bank account. I could afford it, but at what cost? Helping them meant giving up the life I had built, the independence, the freedom, and deep down, I knew it wouldn't just be a few months. It would never be enough. For the first time in my life, I let myself ask the question I had been too afraid to face. What if I said no? I had spent my whole life trying to earn my mother's love. But maybe it was time to accept the truth. I would never be enough for her, and that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. I didn't send the money. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. At first, it was quiet. No calls, no emails, no texts. It almost felt like peace. Then the guilt tripping started. Mom left voicemails, each more dramatic than the last. "Maddie, I don't know why you're doing this to us. We're family." When I didn't respond, she switched tactics. "Liam is devastated. He looked up to you, you know." I doubted that. A few weeks later, the messages got angrier. "I can't believe you turned your back on us after everything I've done for you." Everything she had done for me. I stared at my phone, trying to think of a single example, and I came up empty. 2 months passed, and life felt normal. I focused on work, started going to the gym again, even made plans for a trip to Europe, something I'd never let myself do when I was constantly handing my money over to Mom. For the first time in years, I felt free. Then, one Friday night, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Mom stood on the other side. She looked rough, her clothes wrinkled, hair unkempt. But her expression was what caught me off guard. She looked desperate. "Maddie," she started, stepping forward. "I need to talk to you. I didn't move. How did you find my address?" Her lips pressed together. "That doesn't matter. Can I come in?" I hesitated, then sighed and stepped aside. She walked in like she belonged there, like we weren't practically strangers. I closed the door and turned to her. "What do you want?" She clasped her hands together. "I know things have been tense between us." That was one way to put it. "But I'm still your mother," she continued, "and I need your help." Of course she did. I crossed my arms. "Let me guess. Money?" Her eyes darted away. "Not just that." I waited. She exhaled sharply. "The bank is taking the house." I blinked. "What?" She started wringing her hands. "We fell too far behind on payments." "I tried, Maddie. I really did, but..." I held up a hand. "Stop." She fell silent. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. "Why didn't you get a job?" I asked. Her face twisted in offense. "I had to take care of Liam." "Liam is a grown man," I shot back. "He should be taking care of himself." Mom shook her head. "You don't understand." "No, I do," I interrupted. "I understand that you enabled him for years. I understand that you let him sit around doing nothing while you made excuses. And now, you expect me to fix it." She flinched like I had slapped her. "I'm your mother," she whispered. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I let out a humorless laugh. "It used to." Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she said, "If we lose the house, we have nowhere to go." It was a last-ditch effort. One final play for my sympathy, and it almost worked. But then I thought about all the nights I had spent alone as a kid, waiting for her to notice me. I thought about the years she poured everything into Liam and left me to fend for myself. And I realized something. I didn't owe her anything. I straightened. That's not my problem. Her mouth fell open. Maddie, I'm done, Mom, I said firmly. I can't fix this, and I won't. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, her face hardened. Fine. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, I was free. For real this time, I expected that to be the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. You're a heartless bitch. It didn't take a genius to figure out who sent it. I blocked the number. The next day, I got another one. Mom's crying because of you. Hope you're happy, Liam. I blocked him too. But the messages kept coming different numbers, different accounts. Mom played the victim online, posting vague statuses about how some people forget where they came from. Liam sent me voice notes about how I was tearing the family apart. Candy, his useless girlfriend, even DM'd me. Wow, Maddie. How can you live with yourself? I ignored all of them. Then one night I got a notification. $1,500 withdrawal attempt. Insufficient funds. My stomach dropped. I logged into my bank account and checked my transactions. There it was. An unauthorized withdrawal attempt from my old joint account with Mom. I had forgotten about it, and she had tried to take money from it. My hands shook as I called the bank. I need to close an account. That was the final straw. I changed my number, locked down my accounts, scrubbed my social media. Then I sent one last message to Mom and Liam. Don't contact me again. We're done. And this time, I meant it. It's been 6 months. I don't know where they are or what they're doing. And for the first time in my life, I don't care. I put a down payment on a house last month. My house. My space. I still think about Eric sometimes. He calls every now and then, checking in. He's happy, free, just like me. And as for Liam and Mom, whatever happens next is their problem, not mine. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I cut them off. At first, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for another number to pop up on my phone, for another email, another pathetic attempt to guilt me into fixing their mess. But nothing came. Silence. And I realized something I had been holding my breath for years, waiting for them to acknowledge me, to love me, to treat me as more than just a backup plan. Now, for the first time in my life, I could finally breathe. I settled into my new home quickly. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. The walls were the color I chose. The furniture was arranged exactly how I liked it. There was no mess I didn't make, no one else sucking up all the air in the room. I used to think I'd feel lonely without them, but I wasn't. Not even a little. Eric visited a few weeks after I moved in. He brought a potted plant, a bottle of wine, and a warm hug. I still can't believe it, he said, looking around. You really did it, Maddie. I smiled. Yeah, I guess I did. We had dinner, just the two of us, and for once we didn't talk about Mom or Liam, because they weren't a part of my life anymore. And that was the best decision I had ever made. A few more months passed, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was free for good. Then, one night, Eric called. His voice was tense. Maddie, have you checked your mail? I frowned, glancing at the stack of unopened envelopes on my counter. Not yet. Why? He sighed. I think you should. I grabbed the pile and flipped through it. Bills, ads, the usual junk until I saw it. A letter. From Mom. My chest tightened. I almost tossed it straight into the trash. But curiosity won. I opened it, my hands steady, my heart not. Maddie, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I didn't know what else to do. I lost the house. Liam and I have been staying with a friend, but it's not permanent. I don't have anywhere else to turn. I know I made mistakes. I know I wasn't the mother you needed, but I am still your mother. And I need your help, please, if not for me, then for your brother. Mom, I stared at the letter, reading it over and over. Then I laughed. Of course. Of course she hadn't changed. Even now, when she had nothing left, she still refused to take responsibility. She still made Liam the excuse. She still thought I would save them. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and tossed it into the trash. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in years. A week later, Eric called again. She sent me a letter too, he said. Same sob story. I leaned against my kitchen counter. What are you going to do? He let out a dry chuckle. Nothing. I smiled. Good. He paused. Are you okay? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I pictured Mom and Liam, wherever they were, waiting for me to swoop in and fix their lives. I imagined her checking the mailbox every day, expecting a check that would never come. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, just peace. I exhaled. A slow, steady breath. Yeah, I said. I think I finally am. Months passed, and the letters stopped. No calls, no emails, no messages from unknown numbers. It was over. I didn't know where Mom and Liam had ended up. Maybe they found another person to leech off. Maybe they finally had to figure things out on their own. But whatever happened, it wasn't my concern. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. One afternoon, I was walking through the farmer's market when my phone rang. Eric. Hey, I answered, smiling. Hey, kiddo, he said. Got a minute? Always. He hesitated. I ran into someone today. I stopped in my tracks. Who? He sighed. Your mom. A strange feeling settled in my chest, something between annoyance and curiosity. I found a bench and sat down. Where? At a gas station outside of town. She was at the pump, counting change to pay for fuel. I didn't say anything. She looked rough, Maddie. Not just tired, defeated. A pause. She asked about you. I picked at the corner of my phone case. What did she say? She wanted to know if you were okay. I let out a humorless laugh. Now she cares? Eric sighed. I think she always cared. In her own messed up way. She just never knew how to show it. I shook my head. No, she knew how, she just didn't want to. He didn't argue. After a moment, he said, She didn't ask for anything. That surprised me. No money? No help? No. I leaned back, staring at the sky. Maybe she was finally learning. Maybe she was finally facing the consequences of the choices she had made. But it didn't change anything for me. I hope she figures it out, I said, meaning it. But I'm not going back. Eric's voice was warm, I know. And that was the end of it. Years passed. I built a life, a real one. I traveled, made new friends, moved up in my career, and one day when I least expected it, I fell in love. His name was Adam. He had a steady laugh, a kind heart, and eyes that saw straight through me. On our third date, he asked about my family. I hesitated. It's complicated. He smiled. I've got time. So, I told him, not everything, but enough. And when I was done, he didn't pity me. He didn't try to fix it. He just squeezed my hand and said, You're incredible. You know that? And for the first time, I believed it. When I walked down the aisle years later, Eric was the one waiting at the altar. Not as my groom Adam was already there, grinning ear to ear, but as the man who had stepped in when no one else did. My father figure. My real family. When he gave me away, he whispered, Your dad would be proud. And for the first time in my life, I let myself believe that too. I never heard from Mom again. Liam's name only came up once, years later, when an old neighbor mentioned seeing him working at a grocery store. I wished him well in my mind, then moved on. Because his life was his, and mine was finally mine. One day when I had a daughter of my own, I looked at her and made a promise. She would never wonder if she was loved. She would never feel like she had to earn my affection. She would never question her worth. And as I tucked her into bed that night, her little hand wrapped around my finger, I knew one thing for certain, the cycle ended with me. And I had never been more proud. Story 2, Rebecca, you're leaving your family behind. My workplace was silent until my mother's voice rang loudly over the phone. I could already feel the strain building as I squeezed the bridge of my nose. I've told you this 100 times, Mom. I can't continue to save Brian. He is 30 years old. He must accept accountability for his own actions. Her reply was quick, incisive, and filled with the same accusations of guilt that I had heard a million times before. He is your sibling. Family members are meant to support one another. I took a quick look at my desk's nicely arranged papers. Memories of the tremendous hours I put in to keep myself stable. Mom, I've been there for him for years. It has nothing to do with family, it has to do with his lack of concern. He wants me to clean up the mess again after he squandered all of his cash. I'm Rebecca, and I've been the family's responsible member for as long as I can remember. I grew up quickly when my dad died when I was 12 years old, taking on more than most children my age ever had to. By now, though, my brother Brian always had a way of sliding. Despite working part-time at a convenience shop at the age of 30, he was still able to spend all of his savings on pricey devices. When his landlord threatened to evict him, he took unaffordable trips and nights out. My mother didn't inquire. She wanted me to pay his rent. I declined. That choice threw my mom and Brian into a complete meltdown. I woke up to a notice on my phone 2 days later. When I entered Facebook and read a lengthy message from my mother, my heart fell. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks that families should remain together. Some would sooner forsake their own blood than lend a helping hand. It's unfortunate when family values are subordinated to greed. I'm genuinely let down. People the first hadn't seen in years left remarks, expressing condolences and scolding me for being callous or self-centered. Then there came the post from Brian. I never imagined my own sister would abandon me, but I suppose she values money over her family. I know who truly has my back at least. Thank you, Mother. The treachery hurt more than the words did. To everyone we knew, they were portraying me as a villain, fabricating the tale to portray myself as callous. Setting my phone down, I gazed out the window, a simmering anger under the surface. They publicly shamed me for setting limits as a kind of retaliation for all the sacrifices I had made for them over the years. But I made a choice when the rage subsided into something more pronounced. I was prepared to fight back if they wanted to make this a public show. I couldn't get rid of the rage that was running through me after viewing those Facebook posts. After my dad went away, I made a concerted effort to be the trustworthy person to look after the family. However, this was excessive. With my laptop open in front of me, I sat down at my kitchen table and mentally relived the last several years. How many times had I intervened on Brian's behalf? There are too many to count. When he stopped coming up for work 2 years ago, he lost his job. Until he discovered another one, I paid his bills. I gave him the money to fix his car when it broke down, only to discover later that he had used it to purchase concert tickets. And he immediately turned to internet shopping and expensive trainers with the money he borrowed to get back on his feet. Even Brian's carelessness wasn't the worst part. It was my mother's steadfast support for him. Boys are not like other people. Every time I brought it up, she would say, "All he needs is time to get his act together." Years of justifications have passed since then. She had gone from defending me to openly demonizing me after those Facebook remarks. I opened my email with the intention of answering a question about my job, but I was unable to concentrate. I was unable to go past the knot in my gut. It was enough. I made a call to a lawyer later that night. I described the circumstances. I described the posts and the harm they had done to my reputation, my voice trembling with annoyance. I said, I can't allow them get away with this. I was scarcely able to control my rage. The attorney attentively listened before answering. Although defamation lawsuits can be complex, you have the right to take action if their posts have seriously harmed you on a professional or emotional level. Let's begin by obtaining proof. With a mix of relief and rage, I hung up the phone. Someone was on my side at last. However, as I collected screenshots of the posts, I had a thought. Brian and I each received an inheritance from my dad that was meant to be safeguarded until we turned 25. It hadn't occurred to me in years, assuming that my share was securely stored in an account. My curiosity overcame me. The next day, I gave the lawyer another call. Could you check into my inheritance while we're at it? I simply want to confirm that everything is in order. Of course, the attorney said. That request was going to reveal a far greater betrayal than a few Facebook postings, although I was unaware of it at the time. I got an email that made me shiver a week after I had phoned the attorney. Results of the Red Inheritance investigation are the topic line. I attentively read the summary after clicking on it. My attorney had learnt that Brian had been taking money out of what should have been my share of the inheritance for the previous 5 years. Up until my 25th birthday, my mother had been in charge of the account. However, it appeared that Brian had acquired it in some way and had been using it often ever since. As I flipped over the page, my hands shook. Thousands of money were lost. Who knew what I had done with money I didn't even realize I possessed? My lawyer's voice was stern but calm when I phoned him for further information. Your sibling seems to have entered the account without your consent. It is obviously stolen. Much of what was rightly yours has been stolen by him. I tried to take in what he was saying while leaning back in my chair. How did this occur? For years, my mother managed the account. Nothing regarding Brian having access was ever mentioned by her. She might not have known. That's what the lawyer said. She could have trusted him to handle things appropriately, though. It's a major violation in any case. The ramifications were astounding. Not only had Brian been stealing from me, but my mother had also allowed it to happen that evening, whether she knew it or not. I was sitting at my kitchen table looking at the financial documents that I had received from my lawyer. Every transaction was like being slapped across the face. Electronics, trips, and concert tickets, things that I had found difficult to pay for myself when Brian was living off of my money. All of a sudden, the Facebook post seemed like the least of my issues. This was no longer only about humiliating in public. The whole foundation of my family was betrayed by this. I considered phoning my mother at that very moment to demand answers, but I restrained myself. There would just be more deflection and guilt tripping if you confronted her without a plan. I emailed my lawyer instead. What will happen next? I inquired. I decided I wasn't going to let this go by the time I went to bed. I had been the one who made sacrifices and maintained harmony for years while Brian got away with everything. No more. One thought kept coming to me as I switched off the light. They're going to discover just who they're up against. I spoke with my lawyer about the next steps in his office the following day. As I presented all the information he had discovered, the cramped space felt oppressive. The inheritance isn't the only issue here, I spoke aggressively. My mother and Brian have gone too far. Even though those Facebook posts were awful, I now learn that he has been defrauding me for years. I want to do something about it. Take serious action. My attorney gave a nod. His face was composed and businesslike. First, we will file a defamation lawsuit based on the posts on social media. However, we will need to pursue a different case in relation to the inheritance theft. With the records we have, it's simple, but it could get complicated. I don't mind being messy, I said, crossing my arms. I've had enough of them stepping all over me. I gave my mother a call that night. I needed answers, whether she was complicit in this or just blindly trusting Brian. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice steady. Rebecca, she answered quickly, her tone still carrying the usual edge of annoyance. Are you calling to apologize? You know Brian is. Save it, I interrupted, cutting her off mid-sentence. I have some questions about Dad's inheritance, specifically about why Brian has been accessing my portion. There was a long pause on her end. What are you discussing? She finally asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Or was it guilt? I had a lawyer look into it, I said. For the past 5 years, Brian's been withdrawing money from my share. Thousands of dollars. Mom, did you know about this? Her hesitancy spoke volumes. Rebecca, it's not what you think, she said finally. Brian, he needed aid. He assured me he'd pay it back. My chest constricted, a mixture of rage and disbelief sweeping over me. You were aware? You knew he was taking from me. And you didn't say anything. I didn't believe that was stealing, she added defensively. It's family money. He was in a bad place, and I trusted him to handle it correctly. I laughed fiercely, responsibly. He's been blowing it on holidays and gadgets while I've been working myself to the bone. And you let it happen. Rebecca, please, she pleaded. You don't comprehend. Brian has been having difficulties. I assumed you'd manage without it. It's not for you to decide that. I lost my temper. You gave him the money as if it were nothing, even though I trusted you to keep it safe. How deceived do I feel at the moment, do you know? I was no longer able to listen to her arguments. We're done talking, I said icily. My lawyer will be speaking to you. A flash of awareness swept over me as I hung up. I had allowed them to control me and shame me into obedience for years. No more. It was more than just taking back what was rightfully mine. It was about defending myself at last. That phone call had immediate repercussions. My phone was flooded with missed calls and anxious texts from my mother the next morning. In the voicemails, she alternated between being defensive and pleading. You can't do this, Rebecca. Brian had no malicious intent. Then let's simply get together and discuss this as a family. You don't have to hire solicitors. However, I didn't answer. I had a feeling of mastery. The money was no longer the only consideration. It was about establishing limits and letting them know that I would no longer be their doormat. Naturally, Brian adopted a different strategy. I discovered a fresh wave of posts directed at me when I checked Facebook later that day. She first declines to assist her own brother. She is now threatening to sue her family for financial reasons. Greedy, self-centered, and callous. When it comes to money, some individuals truly display their actual selves. My jaw tensed as I gazed at the message. The same group of facilitators from before expressed their uninvited thoughts in the comments section. She sounds terrible. No matter what, family should come first. You're better off without her, Brian. And without hesitation, I forwarded my lawyer a screenshot that I had taken. I had another meeting with him the next day. He responded, "We're filing both cases. The lawsuit for slander is simple. Regarding the inheritance, we have ample proof that it was stolen. However, you must be ready. Your connection with your mother will become even more strained as a result of this." I leaned forward with a grim face. "It's already too stressed to fix. Come on, let's do it." He gave a nod. "Another stuff. Brian will have to explain where the money went if this gets to court. Are you prepared for that? It could become unsightly." Something in me paused. Was I curious about the extent of this betrayal? However, I then reflected on the years I had given up for a family that never showed gratitude for me. I'm prepared. I spoke aggressively. My mother gave me another call that night. I picked Rebecca up this time. Her voice wavered as she spoke. "I spoke with Brian. He gave me some information on the funds. I had no idea it was so nasty." "He told you what?" With a harsh tone, I asked. Her quiet was quite telling. Finally, she muttered, "I'm sorry. I had no idea how much he had taken. I ought to have prevented him." I allowed her to continue even though her comments sounded empty. "I will speak with him once again. We'll work it out. Don't take this to court, please." I take a deep breath and close my eyes. "Mom, it's out of my control now. You ought to have considered this years ago." I was relieved and angry at the same time as I hung up. Although it was much too late to reverse the harm, she was beginning to realize the reality. My lawyer phoned me a week later with an update that took me entirely by surprise. "We have been looking over more financial documents." His tone was calm yet serious as he started. "As it happens, Brian has been using more than simply your inheritance. Additionally, he has been abusing several of your mother's accounts." I went cold. "What are you saying?" "It appears that he has been using money that your mother put up for her retirement." He clarified that we discovered regular withdrawals that followed the same pattern as the ones he took out of your inheritance. I was momentarily at a loss for words. In spite of his shortcomings, my mother had been unyielding in her defense of Brian, and now he had also stolen from her. "Is she aware?" Finally, I asked. "Not just yet," he said. "However, this information will be revealed if we move forward with both instances." My thoughts were racing when I hung up. Even though I felt bad for my mother for helping Brian, I felt sick to my stomach at the prospect of her losing her retirement funds. I gave her mother a call later that night. I started studying my voice. "It will not be pleasant to hear what I have to tell you." "What is it?" Her voice was tired as she inquired. I described what the attorney had found. It was deafeningly quiet on her end. My money was stolen by him. At last, she uttered a tremulous murmur. I softened my tone and responded, "Yes, Mom. You deserve to know, even if I didn't want to. Brian has been robbing us both." She reacted with a mixture of astonishment and destruction. Her voice broke as she continued, "I can't believe this." "I had faith in him. I had complete faith in him. You ought not to have," I said softly. "You've been supporting him for years, even though I know you adore him. When there are no repercussions, this occurs." She started crying, and I felt pity for her for the first time, just as much as she had hurt me. She fell prey to Brian's self-centeredness as well. Now, what should we do? Through her tears, she inquired. We waited for the judicial proceedings to conclude. I spoke aggressively. "The money is no longer the only consideration here. It has to do with responsibility." The days that followed were stressful. I could feel the weight of the impending encounter bearing down on me as my lawyer submitted both cases. Although I knew it would be difficult, I also knew it was essential. I had let my mother and Brian use my generosity for years. However, I was defending myself this time. They needed to confront the repercussions of their behavior, regardless of the pain. The initial court date came sooner than I anticipated. As I sat in the courtroom, I had a mix of anxiety and excitement. For the years of entitlement, the thievery, and the way Brian portrayed me as the bad guy, I wanted justice. On the other hand, I was aware that this procedure would be unpleasant and bring the most sinister truths about our family to light. I became enraged at Brian's arrogant demeanor as he and my mother entered the courtroom. He dared to appear disinterested, as if this were just another annoyance in his life. But my mother seemed totally defeated. Her shoulders were stooped as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with her, and she averted her eyes from mine. The attorney meticulously presented the evidence. Black and white screenshots of the social media posts, bank statements, and transaction details were displayed. Every time my attorney talked, I noticed Brian moving uneasily in his chair, and Brian's tone was appropriately contemplative when he finally spoke. His voice was brimming with fake sincerity as he continued. I didn't mean for things to get this far. Well, I was having trouble. The only reason I took the money was because I believed I could repay it. However, Rebecca has no idea what it's like to be in need of assistance. She has always been well organized. As I heard his justifications, my jaw tightened. The gadgets, the evenings out, and the trips were not explained by struggling. And despite his best efforts to portray himself as the victim, the facts were clear. My mother paused and looked anxiously at Brian when the court asked her to testify. At last, her voice wavered as she spoke. I had faith in Brian, she said. I had assumed that he would handle the money sensibly, but I had no idea how much he had taken or what he was doing with it. I was unaware of how deeply he had wounded Rebecca. Although her remarks were painful, they also had a hint of responsibility. She was admitting reality. I won the case in court. In addition to being compelled to pay back the money he had stolen, Brian and my mother were had to publicly apologize online as part of the settlement of the defamation action. It wasn't a flawless triumph. I was aware that Brian would not be able to repay his debt for years. Furthermore, even if the apology was heartfelt, the harm they had caused was not undone. However, it was a beginning. Brian glared at me as we walked out of the courthouse. I hope all is well with you. He spit. I answered calmly, looking him in the eye without flinching. My mother followed. She started crying. Rebecca said, I don't know how to make this right. You begin by being truthful, I said, alongside me. With Brian and with yourself. No more justifications. Slowly, she nodded. She had a sorrowful and guilty expression on her face. I'll make an effort, she muttered. I sat in my flat that night and thought about all that had transpired. The struggle in court was ended, but the actual job was only getting started. Although I knew it would be difficult, I believed I had the strength to set limits with my family. Even though it was painful to see my mother and brother for who they truly were, I was relieved that I had at last defended myself. Life was strangely calm in the weeks after the court decision. My mother no longer bombarded me with texts and calls requesting that I help Brian or resolve their most recent problem. She appeared to have retreated as a result of the decision. Or perhaps she was simply too ashamed to approach me. However, the quiet didn't seem meaningless. It was peaceful. My phone rang one afternoon when I was at the kitchen table going over my invoices. My mother's name briefly displayed on the caller ID. I thought about leaving it on voicemail, but I had to answer for some reason. I said in a neutral tone, Hello, Mom. Hello, Rebecca, she said, a little hesitantly. I've been considering every aspect of the bequest. The case in court. Brian. Uncertain of where this was headed, I waited. She went on. At first, I didn't want to believe it, but I can't ignore the truth anymore. Regarding him, you were correct about me. I allowed him to take advantage of you and watched as he caused you pain. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared for how hard her remarks affected me. I had hoped for an apology like this for years. I wasn't sure how to feel, though, now that it was here. I appreciate you expressing that. Finally, I said, Mom, it's not simply about saying sorry. The goal is to change. I've allowed you and Brian to treat me like I'm unimportant for years. That must end. She let out a sigh. I am aware that I have been considering ways to improve. I just hope we can work things out before it's too late. I took a while to reply. There is yet time. Eventually, I responded, but it will take time. Brian, meantime, had been radio quiet. A part of me questioned whether he was planning retaliation. However, my attorney advised me that he could not financially retaliate because of the agreements. I knew better than to put my confidence in him, though. I was notified one day that Brian had made a post on Facebook. I opened it against my better judgment. I'm getting ready for more hate mail. Rather, I came upon a post that was very different from his typical tone. I would like to express my regret to everyone I have harmed, particularly my sister Rebecca. I'm trying to make up for the mistakes I did that cannot be undone. I'm hoping she'll forgive me, but I know it will take time. I couldn't decide if I should laugh or cry. Was this only a show, or was he genuinely attempting to accept responsibility? In any case, I chose not to answer. I was not prepared to reopen that door. Not quite yet. I started to reconstruct my life in the months that followed. I pushed myself into my work, picked up some abandoned hobbies, and even began organizing a long overdue trip. My mother and I continued to have a functional but brittle relationship. She tried to give me a call once a week, not to berate me or make demands, but to find out how I was doing. Even though it was a tiny step, it felt important. Regarding Brian, I avoided him. He had been ordered by the court to repay the money he had stolen, but I knew I wouldn't see the majority of it for years. I was okay with that. I wasn't waiting for him to change his ways. The most important thing was that I had regained my authority. A few months later, I was enjoying a cup of tea while sitting on my balcony and seeing the distant twinkling city lights. For the first time in a long, long time, my family's incessant requests were not on my mind. Things have altered in my life that I never would have imagined. My shoulders were no longer burdened by the continual stress. Instead, I felt a calmness I was unaware I had. I had always believed that defending myself would entail losing my family and my sense of identity. Instead, it had provided me with what I had been looking for the entire time: calm. Although it was taking a while, my mom and I had started to mend our connection. She continued to give me a weekly call, usually to tell me about little things like her garden or a book she was reading. It seemed as though the burden of hidden expectations had finally been lifted from these discussions. Brian, on the other hand, kept his distance. I was grateful for the reparations, but I didn't rely on them, and his court-ordered payments came in irregularly. In actuality, I might have gone on without his money or apology. I had come to appreciate myself and learn to stand on my own, not because I was angry or spiteful. And it was sufficient. Thinking back on all that had transpired, I came to the conclusion that my family had not undergone the biggest transformation. I had it. I had been engaged in a vicious cycle for years of looking to those who simply appeared to take me for granted for acceptance. I had gone above and above to provide for my family, putting my personal security and happiness at risk. However, defending myself, even when it was difficult, had led me down a different route. A tiny consolation was my mother's hesitant attempts to mend our connection. In her own way, she was attempting to put things right, but I still didn't have complete faith in her. There were hints of the mother I had imagined her to be, someone who valued me not only for what I could provide, but also for who I was. But Brian was another matter entirely. I wasn't prepared to let him back into my life, and his public apologies sounded insincere. I might be able to forgive him in the future. However, it was not that day. The most important thing was that I had learnt to respect my own time and work and to set boundaries. There were times when I doubted myself, and it wasn't always easy. However, I now realized that it was always the appropriate thing to do to defend my value. I was quietly proud when I took a drink of my tea. Even if my family may not have changed entirely, I had, and that was sufficient. I had worked hard to gain this tranquility, and I wasn't going to let it go. Story 3. Enjoy a pleasant stroll. From the driver's seat, my husband James yelled in jest, and his family laughed with him. I stood there in disbelief, one hand on my 8-month pregnant belly as their luxury SUV pulled away from the remote gas station. The blazing Florida sun beat down as I watched their taillights disappear, headed toward their beach resort vacation without me. My name is Kayla Thompson, and until that moment, I believed I understood what betrayal felt like. However, witnessing my 3-year-old husband desert his expectant wife at a remote gas station was an entirely different level of brutality. As they drove away, I could still see the grinning features of his sister Ashley, mother Diana, and sister in the back seat. It had started as a normal bathroom break during our road trip to Daytona Beach. I'd asked James to wait while I used the toilet, since walking was getting increasingly difficult in my 3rd trimester. They were all pointing at me through the car windows and laughing when I got out. They left me trapped in the sweltering heat before I could get to the car. The entire incident was observed by Tom, the proprietor of the petrol station, an elderly guy with soft eyes. He offered me a cold drink as soon as he led me into the air-conditioned store. "I've got security cameras covering the whole property," he continued, his voice tight with rage. What they did? That's not correct. Sitting in his tiny office, I tried to take in the events of the previous moment. My phone was in the car, along with my handbag and everything else. All I had with me was my sundress, and I was practically stuck. I got some water and crackers from Barbara, Tom's wife, who worked in the store. Barbara said, her cheeks flushed with righteous rage. "I'm calling the local news. People need to see this. Why would a guy abandon his pregnant wife to be stranded while his family laughs? This is incorrect. I ought to have tried to stop her or felt ashamed. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Let them call the news. Let everyone see just what type of man James Wilson actually was." As I touched my big tummy, feeling my baby daughter kick, I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about shielding my kid from a household who felt brutality was humorous. In hindsight, there had been red flags regarding James and his family from the start. James seemed kinder and more sincere than his family when we first met 3 years ago at a charity gala. At Florida Values Insurance, a business that took pride in upholding traditional family values, he served as a corporate executive. I loved working with kids as a kindergarten teacher. Despite his family's tacit disapproval, we fell in love fast and were married within a year. My mother-in-law, Diana, oversaw the esteemed Wilson Family Foundation, which planned well-known charitable functions in Jacksonville. She never failed to remind me that I wasn't quite part of their social group. She would say, "It's sweet that you work with children." She spoke in a condescending tone. Though I always hoped James would marry someone more accomplished, James's sister Ashley was even worse. She had orchestrated countless social situations designed to humiliate me, like the time she invited me to a casual lunch that turned out to be a formal charity board meeting, leaving me mortified in my simple sundress among women in designer suits. She smirked and said, "Oh, I must have forgotten to mention the dress code." But James had always defended me, at least in the beginning. When I became pregnant, that changed. He seemed to have a switch flip in him. Suddenly, he started agreeing with his mother's criticism, laughing at his sister's cruel jokes and treating me like I was an embarrassment. Tom's voice brought me back to the present. "The news crew will be here in about an hour," he said, checking his phone. "And I've got the security footage ready. Shows everything clear as day." Barbara handed me another bottle of water. "Your hands are shaking, dear. When was the last time you ate?" I realized I'd missed lunch, caught up in the excitement of the trip. The trip that was supposed to be our last vacation before the baby came. James had insisted his family join us, claiming it would be good for family bonding. I should have known something was wrong when he made me sit in the back seat so his mother could sit up front. "Silently," I said. "He said it was because she gets carsick." But they were whispering and laughing the whole time. Barbara's face hardened. "Well, they won't be laughing when everyone sees what they did." My nephew works at Channel 7 News. Trust me, this story won't stay quiet. While waiting for the news crew, I borrowed Tom's landline to call my best friend Nicole. She'd never trusted James or his family, especially after what happened at my baby shower last month. "Kayla, thank God you're okay," Nicole answered. "You need to see what they're posting on social media right now." Tom turned his computer monitor toward me, logging into Facebook. There on James's page was a series of photos posted just 20 minutes ago. My hands shook as I read the caption, "Finally free for a relaxing family vacation. Some people just can't handle the Wilson lifestyle. Beach life. Family first." The photos showed James, Diana, and Ashley lounging by the resort pool, cocktails in hand, acting like nothing was wrong. Comments from their social circle poured in, all laughing and congratulating them on their escape. "There's more," Nicole said grimly. Diana's foundation just announced a fundraiser for family values and responsibility next week. The hypocrisy is unreal. Tom's security footage was playing on his other monitor. I watched myself walking out of the bathroom, pregnant belly prominent as James's SUV deliberately pulled away. The sound was clear enough to pick up their laughter. "Those aren't people," Barbara muttered, watching the footage. "They're monsters." My phone was still in the car, along with my hospital bag, the bag I'd packed carefully with everything I might need. Given how close I was to my due date, the realization hit me hard. They hadn't just abandoned me. They deliberately put my baby at risk. A sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Barbara noticed immediately and grabbed my hand. "Honey, are you having contractions?" "Just Braxton Hicks," I assured her, but another pain made me gasp. "At least I think they are." Tom was already on the phone with emergency services. "Better safe than sorry," he said. "The nearest hospital is 40 minutes away." As if on cue, a local news van pulled into the parking lot. The reporter, a woman named Jennifer Parker, took one look at my condition and made an executive decision. "We're getting you to the hospital first," she said firmly. "We can do the interview there." This story isn't just about abandonment anymore. It's about endangering an unborn child. As they helped me into the news van, I saw more media vehicles approaching. Apparently, the story had already caught attention. My hands shook as another contraction hit. "This one's stronger than before. The doctors will take good care of you," Jennifer assured me, holding my hand as they drove, "and will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people the Wilsons really are." Looking out the window at the gathering media circus, I realized this had become much bigger than just me. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to unexpected justice. The hospital's maternity ward became an unexpected headquarters for what was quickly turning into a viral news story. My contractions had subsided, false labor brought on by stress, the doctors said, but they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. By evening, the security footage from the gas station had hit every major news outlet in Florida. Miss S. Wilson, a nurse, said, poking her head into my room, "There are more reporters asking to speak with you. Should I send them away?" I was about to answer when my phone lit up. Nicole had brought it to me after retrieving it from the resort where James and his family were staying. A staff member had found it in their room and after seeing the news, reached out to help Kayla turn on Channel 7 now. Nicole urged, her voice urgent. "They're interviewing Diana at the resort." The nurse helped me find the right channel. There was my mother-in-law, perfectly coiffed in her designer resort. We're trying to spin the story. "All of this is miscommunication," Diana said smoothly to the reporter. "Kayla has been very emotional lately. Pregnancy hormones, you understand?" She asked for some time alone, and we respected her wishes. The reporter wasn't buying it. "We have security footage showing your son and your family laughing as you drove away. Miss S. Thompson had no phone, no purse, and was 8 months pregnant in 95-degree heat. How do you explain that?" Diana's composed facade cracked slightly. "The footage must be misleading. Our family foundation has always stood for traditional values." The feed cut to the security video showing their SUV pulling away as they left. The audio was crystal clear. "Enjoy a pleasant stroll," James's mocking voice rang out. My phone started buzzing with notifications. The Wilson Family Foundation social media pages were being flooded with outraged comments. Their major donors were publicly withdrawing support. James's company, Florida Values Insurance, was trending on Twitter. "Your story has gone national," Jennifer Parker said. Walking into my room with her camera crew, "People are furious." "Do you want to make a statement?" I thought about James and his family, probably still lounging by the pool, thinking they were untouchable. I thought about other women who might be trapped in situations with people like them. "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter in the hospital bed. "I want to talk about what happened." The interview was raw and honest. I described how James's behavior had changed during my pregnancy, how his family had orchestrated this vacation to humiliate me. I talked about the baby bag with my medical information that they'd driven away with, showing how little they cared about my child's safety. As I spoke, more messages flooded in. James's colleagues were publicly distancing themselves. His company's CEO had released a statement saying they were deeply concerned about the incident and would be reviewing the situation. Miss S. Thompson, Jennifer said gently, your story has struck a nerve. Women across the country are sharing similar experiences of emotional abuse and abandonment. You've started a movement. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling my daughter kick. I'm not doing this for revenge. I said to the camera, I'm doing this because no one should have to experience what I did today. And my daughter needs to know that her mother stood up to bullies, even when those bullies were family. By morning, the story had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. Tom, the gas station owner, appeared on a national morning show, sharing how his security cameras had captured not just the abandonment, but a disturbing conversation. Before I'd come out of the bathroom, they were planning it. Tom revealed to millions of viewers. The audio picked up the mother-in-law saying this will teach her to embarrass our family. They were laughing about leaving a pregnant woman stranded. Who does that? Nicole rushed into my hospital room, her face flushed with news. Kayla, you need to see this. Someone leaked emails from Diana's foundation. She held up her tablet showing me internal communications from the Wilson Family Foundation. The emails revealed a calculated campaign to isolate me from James, with Diana explicitly stating that a pregnant kindergarten teacher wasn't Wilson material. But the real bombshell came from Ashley's leaked texts to James. Once the baby's born, we'll have grounds to claim she's an unfit mother. Your position at Florida, Values Insurance and Mom's Foundation connections will make sure we get custody. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about humiliating me. They'd been planning to take my baby. Miss S. Thompson, a man in a suit, appeared at my door, introducing himself as Michael Roberts, Florida Values Insurance's chief ethics officer. May I speak with you privately? After Nicole stepped out, he got straight to the point. We've terminated James's employment, effective immediately. Our company cannot be associated with someone who would endanger a pregnant woman and deliberately plan to separate a mother from her child. He handed me a folder. These are screenshots from James's company email, showing he used corporate resources to research custody lawyers specializing in maternal fitness cases. We're turning everything over to your legal team. My hands shook as I read through the documents. James had been laying groundwork for months, documenting every small mistake I made, planning to use my emotional instability against me. One more thing, Michael added, his expression grave. Our HR department discovered James has a pattern of workplace harassment. Several female employees have now come forward with complaints they were previously afraid to file. This goes beyond your situation, Miss S. Thompson. You've exposed a systemic problem. As he left, Jennifer Parker returned with breaking news. Diana's largest charity partners were publicly cutting ties with the Wilson Family Foundation. The prestigious country club, where they held their social events, had revoked their membership. Their carefully constructed world of influence was crumbling. The resort just asked them to leave. Jennifer reported their guests were complaining about sharing space with those horrible people from the news. They're being escorted out as we speak. My phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. It was from James's assistant at Florida Values Insurance. I saved the dashcam footage from his company car. He and his mother were planning this for weeks. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I looked out my hospital window at the gathering, media crews thinking about how quickly truth can come to light. The Wilsons had planned to destroy me, but their own actions had destroyed themselves. Instead, the next day brought an unexpected visitor. James's former executive assistant, Amanda, clutching a thick folder and looking nervous. I can't keep quiet anymore, she said, sinking into the chair beside my hospital bed. The custody plan. It wasn't just about getting the baby. There's money involved. A lot of it. Amanda spread out documents across my bed. Insurance policies, trust fund papers, and financial statements, painted a disturbing picture. James and his family had taken out several policies related to my pregnancy, including a substantial life insurance policy I'd never known about. They were planning to paint you as unstable, Amanda explained, her voice shaking. The abandonment wasn't just cruelty, it was meant to provoke a stress reaction they could document. If you'd gone into labor at that gas station, The implications made me feel ill. Nicole, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. We need to get this to the FBI. This isn't just a viral news story anymore. It's attempted insurance fraud. Jennifer Parker arrived just as we were reviewing the documents. We need to be careful how we handle this. She advised the Wilsons still have powerful friends. They're already trying to spin this as a publicity stunt. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a notification. Diana had posted a video statement on the foundation's website, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. We only wanted to protect our grandchild, she claimed. Kayla's erratic behavior had us deeply concerned. We never meant the video cut off as another call came in, James himself. After conferring with Jennifer and Amanda, I put it on speaker. Kayla, baby, please, he begged, his voice. Sweetheart, sweet. Everything has gotten out of control. Let's talk privately. Work things out. Think about our daughter. She needs her father. I thought about the insurance policies, the custody plans, the calculated cruelty. You're right, James. She does need her father. Just not one who would risk her life for a financial scheme. What are you discussing? His voice turned sharp. Be careful what you say, Kayla. Remember who you're dealing with. No, James. Remember who you dealt with. A kindergarten teacher who knows how to document everything. Who has witnesses? Security footage? And now your own paper trail. Who has the national media watching every move you make? The line went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, the fake sweetness was gone. You'll regret this. My relatives. Your family is finished, I interrupted. Check your phone. The FBI just announced an investigation into the foundation's finances. Apparently, someone sent them some very interesting documents. Amanda smiled grimly as she hung up her own phone. The federal agents just arrived at the motel where they're staying. She reported the insurance company's fraud division is cooperating fully. I rubbed my belly, feeling my daughter kick strongly. She's going to grow up knowing her mother stood up to bullies, I said quietly. That's worth more than any trust fund. Jennifer's camera crew captured the moment the FBI led Diana out of the motel in handcuffs, her perfectly crafted image crumbling as she faced the consequences of her actions. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. 1 week later, I sat in my hospital room cradling my newborn daughter, Lily, who had decided to make her entrance 2 weeks early. Perfectly healthy and beautiful. The TV mounted on the wall played coverage of the Wilson family's downfall. Breaking news: federal investigators have uncovered a pattern of insurance fraud at the Wilson Family Foundation, the anchor announced. Sources say the attempted exploitation of a pregnant woman was just the tip of the iceberg. The footage cut to James being led out of his lawyer's office in handcuffs, no longer the polished executive, but a desperate man facing federal charges. Diana's foundation was being dissolved, its assets frozen. Ashley's social connections had evaporated overnight. Tom and Barbara from the gas station had sent flowers, along with a note. Your daughter has a strong mother that's worth more than any fancy family name. Nicole helped me adjust Lily's blanket as we watched James's company's CEO make a statement. Florida Values Insurance is establishing a fund for victims of domestic manipulation and financial abuse. The seed money comes from the bonus we withdrew from James Wilson upon his termination. I looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in my arms. She would grow up knowing her mother's strength, not her father's cruelty. Getting even isn't always the greatest form of retaliation. It's about breaking free and building something better from the ashes. 3 months later, I returned to my kindergarten classroom, greeted by supportive parents and administration that had stood by me throughout the ordeal. On my desk sat a framed newspaper article. Gas station abandonment case leads to new state law. The Thompson Protection Act now made it a felony to deliberately abandon a pregnant woman in dangerous conditions. Diana's crocodile tears at her sentencing hadn't swayed the judge, who cited her calculated cruelty and handing down a 5-year sentence for insurance fraud. James and Ashley faced similar consequences for their roles in the scheme. My story had become a catalyst for change. Florida Values Insurance had hired me as a consultant for their new family protection initiatives. The speaking invitations poured in women's groups, corporate ethics panels, law enforcement training sessions. But my favorite moments were still in my classroom, teaching my young students about kindness and standing up to bullies. Lily thrived, surrounded by love from my real family. Nicole, who became her godmother. Tom and Barbara, who visited regularly, and the countless strangers who had become allies. The Wilson family's social media accounts stayed silent, their once mighty influence reduced to a cautionary tale. Remember, I told a reporter who asked about my message to others? Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to our greatest strength. Lily will grow up knowing that her mother didn't just survive. She helped change things for the better. Story 4, I said, a family meal. Next week's wedding excites me. My sister chuckled. What? It's already finished. I was shown my Mill's phone. An image of the wedding was present. My sister grinned. I'm sorry, I gave you the incorrect date, haha. I left without saying anything. However, it was them who felt remorse. The living room of Elizabeth Morrison's home was illuminated by gentle sunlight that seeped through the swaying trees in a peaceful residential area in the Boston suburbs. Liz, whose real name was Elizabeth, was sitting in a windowsill chair looking out at her garden's vibrant blooms. Her hair was shoulder length. It was gradually reverting to its initial condition, but with part of its previous fullness gone. Liz took a deep breath and felt the warmth of her coffee cup in both hands. She felt as though she was living a second life every day. The stillness was broken by the ringtone on her smartphone. The name of her mother came up on the screen. How are you, Liz? Tonight? Are you prepared for dinner? There was a trace of stress in Martha's normally pleasant voice. Liz said, Yes, I'm ready, with a smile. You're absolutely correct. Ashley and Jason are also coming, and Dad promised to bring wine. Jason's parents have also been invited. Martha's voice lifted a bit. Liz reassured her. Don't worry, Thomas and Carol are very proper people. Jason's parents are really kind individuals. Carol is always worried about my health, and Thomas in particular has expressed interest in my job. Liz hung up the phone and went to her home office. The folder named Gift for the Hamiltons appeared on her computer screen. After verifying details of a real estate property and bank transfer arrangements, she grinned contentedly. Just then, a recollection from 2 years earlier sprung to life. The white walls of the hospital room and the steady drip of a fourth. Liz was pale and her hair had fallen out as she lay in bed. Ashley stood in the doorway, obviously uneasy, while Martha and George waited anxiously in the corner. Ashley murmured, Get well soon, but her gaze kept straying to the wall clock. However, I must leave immediately. Mike, Ashley, and I are going on a date. Martha reprimanded. Liz is going through a tough moment. Ashley gave a shrug. I also have my own life. I wish you would quit talking about Liz's sickness all the time. Liz dismissed the recollection with a shake of her head. Ashley has also matured, she said to herself in a whisper. She is entitled to happiness. Dr. Grayson, who was seated across from Liz, recalled something else. Elizabeth, well done. You did well on the test. You're in remission, I can say. Liz's eyes filled with tears. Still, full healing will require time. You will gradually regain your strength. Above all, make time for the people you care about. This is an excellent time to think about what life is really about. Liz got to her feet and looked out the window. Placing her palm on her chest, she relished the sensation of life. She then carefully traced the date, April 15th, with her finger after picking up Ashley's wedding invitation. Seeing my sister on her special day is really lovely. Grinning, she opened her closet. Liz pulled out a modestly nice pale blue dress. She reasoned that this wouldn't attract much notice during Ashley's wedding. On her sister's special day, she didn't want to take center stage. Liz's phone rang. Jason was the one. Liz, hello. I'm excited for tonight's meal. By the way, I think the Brooklyn property you told me about is great. For now, I'm not telling Ashley about it. Liz grinned. I'm happy you enjoyed it. You may leave the rest of the process to me. That property is ideal. To keep the surprise intact, let's not discuss real estate throughout dinner tonight. In the large dining room of the Morrison residence, Jason thanked him and hung up on Sunday night. There were flowers and excellent china on the table, along with crystal cups of deep red wine. Liz was seated with Ashley and Jason, her parents Martha and George, and Jason's parents, Thomas and Carol Hamilton. As she brought in a silver plate filled with roast meat, Martha made a pleased announcement. One of Liz's favorite dishes is today's roast beef. When she was ill, she stated, I want to eat Mom's roast beef when I get better. Liz Elizabeth received a warm grin from Thomas Hamilton. Your recuperation is just amazing. Our family also like it a lot. Jason often praises your bravery. Liz gave a kind, if rather sheepish, response. Thomas, thank you. This event taught me a lot, most notably the value of spending time with family. Ashley, wearing gaudy jewelry, squirmed uneasily in her chair. As though she wanted to be the focus of attention, she spoke louder. Hello, everyone! Do you not want to know what we have planned for our honeymoon? Bali is our destination of choice. As the dinner went on and the discussion flowed, Liz smiled warmly and remarked, I'm really looking forward to the wedding next week. Seeing my sister on her special day makes me very pleased, and my health has improved. The table suddenly became quiet. Ashley looked perplexed and set down her fork. The already completed wedding. She chuckled a little. What? Liz said, perplexed. However, didn't the invitation state April 15th? She accessed a picture of the saved invitation after removing her smartphone from her purse. It's the old invitation, I see. Ashley gave a shrug. At the last minute, we moved it to last weekend. I desired a modest ceremony. Liz felt her face drain of blood. However, am I not family? Carol, Jason's mother interrupted. The ceremony was quite beautiful. She pulled out her phone. I have photos, you see. Unaware of the circumstances, Carol was ready to share the pictures when Ashley's expression briefly went into terror. Liz looked at Carol's phone screen slowly. Yes, there were pictures from the wedding. A lawn ceremony, a white tent, a floral altar, and a wedding in the classic American manner. Ashley wearing a white dress, parents grinning, Jason's entire family, a picture of pals together. But there was no sign of Liz. As Carol flipped through the pictures, Liz kept an eye on her hand. She was absent from every picture. What's going on, Ashley? Liz's tone faltered. How come I was the only one who was unaware? Not even an invitation. Ashley smiled and said softly, I must have given you the incorrect date. Apologies. Reaching for her wine glass, she took a drink. Lately, I've been rather busy. Jason stared at his sister-in-law, Liz, with an awkward and contrite expression. I believed that invitations had been sent. I sincerely apologize. Martha gave Ashley a glance. Why would you act in this manner? Ashley answered, a little irritated. Isn't that not a huge deal? Liz felt exhausted and ill. During the ceremony, do you think everyone would be fawning over her? It was my day. Liz felt her face drain of blood. Across the table, Ashley's parents were staring at her with bewildered looks. Carol and Thomas were astounded too. Liz got up slowly and just muttered, I see. She heard Ashley say, Aren't you being a bit too sensitive? Before she left the dining room without saying anything else. It's a wedding. The most wonderful day of my life. Liz made her way to the front entrance, where everything had to be flawless. Thomas's harsh, low voice was also audible to her. Ashley, this type of conduct is unacceptable to me. Family is my top priority. Liz stepped outside, climbed into her vehicle, and inhaled deeply. Refusing to cry, she pulled out her phone and launched the app for her bank. She hit the cancel button after displaying a $100,000 transfer reservation that was saved under Ashley and Jason's new house gift. A screen for confirmation came up. After a brief pause, Liz clicked the confirm button. The notice appeared on the screen. The transfer has been canceled. She turned on the car's engine. Liz sat calmly but resolutely in front of her computer the following morning. She opened a draft of an email and entered the subject line to Joseph about the Brookline property. I've made the decision to cancel the Hamilton couple's reservation at the property. My assistance plans have changed as a result of family circumstances. I'm sorry, but could you kindly give it to other customers? Once the transmit button has been pressed. Liz grabbed her cell phone and dialed. It's Liz, Helen. Regarding the Hamilton couple specifically, Ashley and Jason, I have a message for the Boston area real estate agent network. Liz wrote on her notepad and went on. Indeed, precisely. I would like them to be taken care of if they are looking for properties. Is being processed or sold at this time. 3 months is the duration. After giving it some thought, she continued, No, until they find another way, This is a personal matter. Liz hung up and looked out the window. Instead of feeling content, she felt depressed. She said, "This hurts more than when I was sick." When Liz's phone rang that afternoon, on the screen was Jason's name. After a little pause, Liz responded, "I really apologize for yesterday, Liz." Jason sounded honest. "I was unaware that you were not invited and that the wedding arrangements had changed." "It's not your fault, Jason," Liz gently retorted, "but I find it incomprehensible that someone would purposefully leave out her own sister from her wedding, particularly if she had just returned from the edge of death." There was a pause before Jason remarked, "I don't understand either," in a quiet voice. According to Ashley, who I spoke with, Liz's presence would depress the wedding's atmosphere, that Liz's beautiful day would be ruined by everyone's sympathy. His voice was icy. "I see, Liz." Jason quickly added, "I can understand her point, but I don't think that way. My father in particular is unhappy, as is the rest of my family. Above all, he cherishes familial ties." And Liz attempted to cut the talk short, understanding what you've gone through. "You're a nice guy, Jason, but I need more time at the moment. I get it. I just wanted to let you know about the Brooklyn home we were considering. Tomorrow is when we intend to view it. I'd want to show Ashley." Liz let out a quiet breath. "I understand. I wish you luck." Liz's phone rang the next day. She inhaled deeply before responding. "Liz, what's happening?" There was wrath in Ashley's voice. "All of the homes we were considering were abruptly listed as under contract. They were only listed last week. All of them, including real estate brokers, suddenly respond strangely when they hear my name." Liz answered calmly. "The real estate market is subject to fluctuations. Properties are particularly busy in the spring. However, Jason claimed that even the Brookline home you suggested unexpectedly entered the process. What's happening?" Liz gave a succinct response. "I've made the decision to stop participating." "What are you saying?" Ashley's voice became much more elevated. "I was not invited to your wedding, Ashley. You believed that without me, the environment would be better. In the same way, I think you can buy real estate on your own." From the other end came a sudden intake of breath. "No. Are you seeking retribution against me? Why would you do that?" Silently, Liz said, "It's not retaliation. All I'm doing is reevaluating how I spend my time and money. You don't need me, I've come to realize." A week later, the Morrison family gathered in the living room having an urgent family meeting. Ashley and Jason were there, along with Jason's parents, Liz, and her parents. There was anxiety in the air. However, Thomas was the first to speak, holding back his rage. His voice was aristocratic as he started. Having served as a judge for many years, Ashley has witnessed several family conflicts and places a high priority on her own family. "Our family values are violated by your willful exclusion of your sister from the wedding." Ashley tried to protest, but Jason stopped her, which profoundly hurts Jason. "Hold on. Listen, Ashley. After our mortgage application was denied, we looked into it and discovered that Boston real estate brokers were reportedly avoiding us out of respect for your sister." Ashley's expression was one of uncertainty and rage as she gazed at Liz. "Have you done anything? Do you intend to destroy our lives?" Silently, Liz said. "As a wedding present, I had saved up $100,000 for a down payment on your new house. I had acquired a rare property when she pulled out her smartphone and displayed the cancel transfer page. However, it appears that I am no longer required." Martha gave a start. "Liz, you have $100,000. Ashley gasped. $100,000? "No, it isn't possible. It's not a falsehood." Liz also provided the history of the transfer reservation cancellation. "I truly hoped that my experience of confronting death would bring you joy. I discovered that the most significant factor is familial ties. However, you choose a different decision." Jason was astonished. He couldn't think of anything to say. Ashley appeared to be experiencing genuine dread for the first time, and her face had gone white. The living room was filled with a strained quiet. At last, Ashley said something. "I had no idea, Liz." Her voice faltered. "You didn't need to know," answered Liz gently. "It was meant to be unexpected." "But why so much money?" Ashley was perplexed. "Considering that you are my sister." Liz gave a straightforward response. I wanted you to be happy, Carol, Jason's mother, remarked. I wanted to bless your new beginning in life. What have you done, Ashley? Doctors informed Liz that time with loved ones is valuable, and she just returned from the edge of death. Additionally, Thomas had a severe expression on his face as he looked at Ashley. It appears that you are unaware of the seriousness of what you have done. According to our principles, it is unacceptable to disregard familial ties. With regret, Martha murmured. Why? As she sat next Ashley. You've always been important to Liz. Ashley tried to make excuses after realizing how severe the issue was. I really did not want my glitzy wedding to be ruined. I assumed Liz would be the center of attention if she showed there. My special day would become her comeback celebration if the sister who beat cancer showed up. In a chilly tone, Liz's father spoke. Is that your justification? After your sister faced death, you were unable to join in her happiness as she recovered. Jason put his hands over his face. We are unable to find a new residence and are in debt from the wedding expenses. He gave Liz a glance. Did our mortgage application involve you in any way? Liz gave an honest response. Without my portion to the down payment. Your application may be impacted if your debt-to-income ratio has changed. Additionally, I advised real estate brokers to avoid interacting with you at this time. Ashley, I expect honesty and family values in my son's spouse, Thomas remarked angrily as he stood up. I must reevaluate your suitability as my son's life mate. Ashley's face became white. What are you saying? Carol put her hand on her husband's shoulder and murmured in a low voice. We'll have to reevaluate the payment we agreed to make for the marriage. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. However, we are officially married already. Thomas's countenance remained grim. My area of expertise is law. Marriage dissolution is difficult, but not impossible, particularly when there have been fraudulent acts. After giving Ashley a long look, Jason got up and moved toward the window. Anguish was visible on his face. Ashley, I love you, but I can't imagine this. I couldn't harm my sister in this way. George and Martha sat in silence. They had gloomy expressions on their faces. Liz got to her feet slowly. I don't think we need to carry on this discussion, everyone. She was firm but gentle in her speech. I don't criticize your decisions, Ashley. I simply accept them. You don't need me either. I will not meddle in your affairs. Ashley's voice, however, faltered. Liz grinned. It appears that I am now only an acquaintance rather than your sister. It's okay. I learned many things from facing death. Liz grabbed her purse. Let's wrap up for the day here. Enjoy your meal, everybody. She was on her way to the door. Jason ran to catch up with her. Hold on, Liz. I want to say how much my family appreciates you and how much I admire your bravery. Liz said, Jason, you might need to work on your judgment of people after giving it some thought. She gave a soft smile. That's your life, though. You have an option. Liz opened the door. Liz, please return, Ashley cried. Let's have a conversation. Liz didn't turn around if it had to do with the $100,000. Ashley, this has nothing to do with money. It concerns respect, trust, and the definition of family. After silently shutting the door, she inhaled deeply. Her hair was brushed by the gentle spring breeze outside. Liz grabbed her phone and launched the banking app. She created a brand new transfer process and called it the Cancer Patient Support Foundation donation. She tapped confirm after entering $100,000 in the amount field. Although life is brief, it lasts a lifetime if it is spent on worthwhile endeavors. Gazing up at the sky, Liz whispered. After that, she climbed into her vehicle and headed out to a fresh tomorrow. All of the family members were staring at Ashley as she sat inside the house looking desperate. Thomas, Jason's father, said gravely, Ashley, you lost the most valuable thing in life today. Not $100,000, but genuine familial ties. My daughter has become such a person, Martha remarked, pressing a handkerchief to her tears. For the first time, Ashley appeared to genuinely comprehend the consequences of her behavior. Her eyes brimmed with tears. However, it was possibly too late to fix what she had damaged. On a Sunday afternoon in the early summer light, in a verdant park in the Boston suburbs, Liz took a seat in the shade on a bench. Her hair had returned to its previous fullness and now hung beyond her shoulders. She had a fountain pen and a little notebook on her lap and an iced tea from takeout was sitting next to her. Morrison. Elizabeth. Liz noticed a man standing there as she looked up. He had a soft grin and was dressed in casual elegance. Daniel Bradley is my name. I appreciate your time. Liz pointed to the seat next to her with a smile. It's my joy. Sit down, please. Daniel seemed a little anxious as he sat on the bench. The narrative of a cancer survivor living a second life. I was very impacted by it. The chapter on family interactions in particular. It resonated. Liz nodded quietly. 6 months after it was released, her book had unexpectedly become a bestseller. Her honest story of overcoming death and mending relationships struck a chord with a lot of people. Liz declared, I'm prepared for the interview. Regarding the LA, I take it that the Boston Healthy piece focuses on the psychological issues and everyday life of cancer survivors? Indeed. Many readers are curious about what it's like to return to normal life following treatment. Daniel opened his notepad, focusing on the evolution of relationships. Liz's mobile rang. Her countenance clouded a little as she turned to face the TV. I must take this. Excuse me, she inquired as she answered the phone. Helen, what is it? Liz? Ashley got in touch with us once more. Helen sounded worn out. This month alone, it's the 3rd time. Liz let out a sigh. I get it. Take care of it normally. Liz hung up and turned an apologetic face toward Daniel. It was a call for labor. Let's go back to the interview, Daniel recommended. Regarding the first query, how has having cancer affected your perspective on life? Liz looked off into space. I've stopped worrying about little things and have begun to live my life according to my own principles, rather than those of other people. Meanwhile, Ashley stood at the window of a little apartment in downtown Boston. Her face was a mixture of remorse and exhaustion. There was an open laptop and a stack of money on the table. An email with the heading Final Notice of Divorce Proceedings appeared on the screen. Thomas came as the door opened, and despite his harsh demeanor, he shone sympathy. The conversations are ended, Ashley. I am here on behalf of Jason. He gave her a document-filled envelope. This is the last suggestion. Despite not opening the mail, Ashley accepted it. Can't I see Liz yet, Thomas? Thomas gave a headshake. She has made it apparent that she no longer wants to be connected. However, about that $100,000, that is no longer relevant, Thomas said in a chilly tone. She gave the money to an organization that supports cancer patients. You stole faith from her instead of money. Ashley's eyes were wide open. Over the previous year, her once glitzy life had undergone a significant transformation. The breakdown of her relationships, the divorce from Jason, and the removal of financial assistance from the Hamilton family. She'd also lost her reputation in the Boston real estate market. I was really stupid, she said. Thomas's face relaxed a little. Everybody makes errors. What matters is your subsequent behavior. Liz's book was read by me, but Ashley turned around. She altered my name. Anyone may find out. It's me. I haven't won her forgiveness. According to Thomas, forgiveness and relationship restoration are 2 different things. You are not hated by her. All she's doing is keeping her distance to preserve her own tranquility. Liz was almost done with her interview. One last question, Daniel added. What guidance would you provide people who have experienced strained familial ties? Liz was careful with her wording. An ideal family relationship doesn't exist, in my opinion. Deep wounds can occasionally caused. It's crucial to remember your own worth and to have the guts to put distance between you and other people when needed. While it's crucial to keep your heart open, she picked up her teacup. My sister and I no longer have a connection, but I have made new friends, relatives, and survivors who have gone through similar things. Daniel wrote down what she had to say. I appreciate this fantastic interview. Liz's phone rang just as she was about to head out. Ashley had sent Liz a text message. Let me at least apologize before I sign the paperwork, even if I might not be able to repay the $100. Or your confidence. Let's get together just once, please. Liz gazed for a while at the message. She then started composing a response to Ashley. I've moved on already. You ought to follow suit. Don't stress over the $100,000. I made that decision, but Liz stopped and considered. Then she went on. Coffee would be acceptable. Liz is next Tuesday at 11, at the Newberry Street Cafe. She hit the submit button, then raised her gaze to the sky. She knew better than anybody that life is brief and uncertain, even though it might not be forgiveness in its fullest sense. Having the guts to take risks is necessary for living a second life. As though affirming herself, Liz murmured to herself. Then she got to her feet and stepped forward again. A cloudless blue stretched as far as the eye could reach in the Boston sky. Story 5, she won't be left alone by you. My voice cracked in terror as I yelled into my phone. I was having trouble breathing since my heart was beating so quickly. Just seconds before, I had heard my daughter Melody's panicked voice, and the hospital room felt abruptly smaller, the walls closing in. Grandma, Grandpa, and Mommy simply drove off. I'm by myself here. Over the phone, she had cried. They stated I am old enough to be left alone and that they're attending Uncle Peter's party. I'm afraid. Christina Harper is my name, Tina. To all those who are acquainted with me, and after losing my husband, Michael, to a vehicle accident 3 years ago, I am a 36-year-old widow doing my best to raise my 10-year-old daughter. Since the passing of her father, Melody has battled anxiety. I occasionally wake up with nightmares because I'm afraid I could experience the same thing. Now, by leaving her when she needed protection, my in-laws had validated her worst fears. The majority, Tina. You're going overboard. Gerald, my father-in-law, snorted into the phone. She must become more resilient. She is no longer a baby. In a few hours, we will return. A couple of hours? I almost let out a yell. She is 10. Leaving a child that age alone is against the law. Return right now to my residence. We're halfway to Peter's already. Barbara, my mother-in-law, added her voice. The entire family will be present for his 60th birthday. Melody was also invited, but she declined. She can choose to do it. What I was hearing was unbelievable. After an emergency gallbladder operation, I found myself unable to leave the hospital. And because a party was more essential, they had left their sole grandchild, my kid, behind. Right now, I'm giving my neighbor Janet a call to see how Melody is doing. My voice trembled with anger as I spoke. And you will never again have unattended access to my kid once I leave tomorrow. Barbara replied dismissively. As usual, you're being dramatic, Tina. Michael would have gotten it. It's you who is softening her. The last straw was using my late spouse against me. We're done talking. Don't come near my residence. I quickly contacted Janet, who lived across the street, after hanging up. Thankfully, she responded straight fast and said she would go check on Melody right away. I knew this was only the beginning as I hung up, shaking with dread and rage. There was a terrible ache in my chest. Not from the operation, but rather from this profound betrayal by those who were meant to assist me in safeguarding my most valuable assets. My parenting had always been undermined by Michael's parents, but this went too far. I made a self-promise to be different with my own family because I didn't have constant supervision growing up. I met Michael in college. I was pursuing a degree in education while he was studying engineering. At the age of 26, I gave birth to Melody, and we were contentedly constructing our lives together. Gerald and Barbara, however, never really liked me. They made subtle remarks about my parenting and housekeeping, believing their son had married below him. Rhythm. Michael served as a barrier between us and always stood up for me. However, that thin barrier vanished after his death. For years, the tension had been increasing. Every family get-together turned into a labyrinth of unwanted advice and passive-aggressive remarks. Tina, she's too attached to you. Melody would cling to my leg as Barbara spoke. With me, Michael was never like that. We instilled independence in him at a young age, which is why. And you're weakening her, Gerald would add. Despite these difficulties, I made an effort to keep them and Melody together. I felt that having grandparents in her life was crucial, since they were the only thing that connected her to her father. For Melody's sake, I swallowed my pride, nodded in agreement with their criticisms, and maintained the peace. I hurried to the emergency room 3 days ago and woke up with terrible stomachache. I was diagnosed with acute colic by the doctors, cystitis. I had to get my gallbladder removed right away. I was worried about Melody. I phoned everyone I knew, but Janet's work schedule only allowed her to assist part-time, and my closest friends were out of town. I contacted Gerald and Barbara in despair. They consented to spend the 3 days I would be in the hospital at our home, apparently pleased to assist. As I went into surgery, I felt a wave of relief, knowing that Melody would be taken care of. I even felt bad about ignoring them for so many years. You see, Tina, in times of difficulty, family is what counts. Barbara had remarked so while she prepared my hospital stay overnight bag. Despite our disagreements, we are here when it matters. I trusted her. I entrusted them with my most valuable possession. When I phoned to check in yesterday, everything appeared to be going well. Melody sounded a little reserved, but I thought it was because she was missing me. There wasn't any indication that they would opt to forego my daughter, their grandchild, for a party today. As I waited for Janet to return my call, I came to the realization that this was more than a single instance of poor judgment. I had been oblivious to the danger, and this was who they really were. After 5 minutes, Janet phoned back. "Now I'm with Melody." She gave me comfort. She's agitated, but, well, she is currently eating cookies with my kid at my place after I brought her here. She can stay with me until tomorrow, when you are released. I felt a wave of relief. "I'm not sure how to express my gratitude, Janet." "Don't thank me," she firmly responded. "They committed the crime of child abandoning. You must report this, Tina." I paused. "They are her grandparents, Michael's parents. Additionally, they left a 10-year-old youngster alone at a party." Janet's tone became stern. "You underwent urgent surgery. What if things had gone wrong? What if tomorrow you are unable to return home?" She was correct. I felt as though I had been physically struck by the possibility of what may have occurred. What if the fire had occurred? What if Melody had suffered harm? What if there had been an intruder? That night, from my hospital bed, I made a painful call to Child Protective Services. The social worker took down my statement in a gentle but serious tone. "This wasn't just a family dispute," she clarified. "Child endangerment was evident in this instance." She clarified that we would have to look into and record this incident. According to state law, leaving a kid at that age is considered neglect. My phone rang again as soon as I hung up. Gerald was the one. "What on earth? Tina? A federal agency called us just now and said they needed to interview us about Melody. What did you say to them?" "The reality." My voice was remarkably steady as I answered that when I was in the hospital, you left my kid to attend a party. It wasn't some crazy party. It was a family get-together. She was also completely safe. Gerald, she was afraid. Since her father, she has struggled with anxiety. You abandoned her after your kid passed away. "This is absurd!" he yelled. "Her grandparents are us. We are entitled to certain rights." Something broke inside of me. Rights? You believe you have rights when you leave a youngster alone? Gerald, you have obligations that you totally disregarded. Similar to how you left. Rhythm. Barbara is sobbing as a result of your actions. "Trying to make me feel bad," he said. "Following everything that we have done for you. Apart from criticizing and undermining me, what have you done specifically? Ever since Michael passed away?" Now, instead of shivering with dread, my voice was quivering with wrath. I apologized to Barbara for her distress, but I'm more worried about my traumatized kid. "Tomorrow I'll be at home. Furthermore, neither of you should come to my residence," he thundered. "You can't stop us from seeing Melody. Observe me." After responding, I hung up. My hospital room seemed chilly and deserted that night. I questioned whether I had overreacted as I looked at the ceiling. However, Melody's terrified voice could be heard each time I closed my eyes. "I'm alone here, Mommy." No, I hadn't gone too far. I had been too patient for too long, if anything. The next morning, I was released from the hospital. I was taken up by Janet, who told me about Melody's night. When we were driving home, Janet muttered that she had a hard time falling asleep, asked often whether you were indeed returning home today. My heart hurt. Did she elaborate on what transpired? Janet paused. She said that they had already abandoned her. I almost choked. What? They apparently left her house for around an hour yesterday to go grocery shopping. They told her not to call you while you were recuperating, so she didn't. I felt a wave of white-hot rage. Twice they had left her and tricked her into not speaking up. Melody sprang into my arms and clung to me like she always did when we got to Janet's house. Following Michael's passing, "Mom, you've returned!" In my shoulder, she wailed. I said, "I'm here, sweetie," holding her close while battling the pain from my surgical incision. I sincerely apologize for what transpired. I reset the codes on our electronic door locks later that afternoon, after we had returned to our house. Even though I was still recovering from surgery, I was determined to change the physical locks, so I called a locksmith. Melody's eyes were wide as she watched me. Our grandparents are returning. Quietly, she asked. I carefully considered my words as I sat next to her on the couch. No, honey, not for a while. Their actions were dangerous and incorrect. I was acting like a baby, they said. Melody muttered. Daddy wouldn't be proud of me being so afraid, according to my grandfather. My throat grew enraged. It was unacceptable to use Michael against our daughter. Your father would be very pleased with you, I spoke firmly. When you felt unsafe, you had the courage to call me. That was precisely the proper course of action. By evening, Gerald, Barbara, and even Michael's brother Peter were texting and calling me nonstop. At last, I took Peter's call. You have to relax, Tina, he began. Mom and Dad are inconsolable. They claim that you changed the locks and reported them to child services. On 2 occasions, they left my daughter Peter behind. I sounded like ice. To attend your birthday celebration, they left a 10-year-old alone. See, they were wrong, I interrupted. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up from soccer practice. Deliberately leaving a child alone after being trusted with her care is a choice. Their family. Tina, Melody's grandparents. Being family doesn't give them the right to endanger my child, I replied. Would you leave your kids alone at that age? His silence was telling. That's what I thought, I continued. I filed a formal report and yes, I've changed the locks. They're not welcome in my home until they acknowledge what they did and take steps to earn back my trust. After hanging up, I found 3 voicemails from Barbara, each progressively more hostile. Tina, this is absurd. Gerald and I have never done anything but love Melody. The first one began the second. You're turning our granddaughter against us. Michael would be horrified by your behavior. And the third left just minutes ago. We're consulting with a lawyer about grandparents' rights. You can't keep us from seeing Melody. You've gone too far this time. I deleted them all, hands shaking. I knew the thread about grandparents' rights might not be empty. They had the resources for legal action, but I also knew I had documentation of their neglect. And protecting Melody was worth whatever battle lay ahead. As I tucked Melody into bed that night, she looked up at me with teary eyes. Am I in trouble with Grandma and Grandpa? No, sweetheart, I assured her. They're the ones who made a bad choice, not you. You're safe now. But when I kissed her goodnight, I worried if any of us were genuinely secure from what was coming next. The next morning, I received an email from CPS saying they'd launched an investigation. The social worker, Miss Patterson, would be questioning all parties involved, commencing with a house visit that afternoon. The email also contained links concerning kids' safety and family therapy. I was escorting Melody to the bus station when my phone called again. Barbara's number. I refused the call, but a text came immediately. We're coming over at noon to speak. This has gone far enough. My palms shook as I texted back. Do not come to my residence. I will call the cops if you arrive up unannounced. 3 dots appeared, faded, then appeared again before her response came through. You wouldn't dare try me. I wrote back after seeing Melody safely onboard the school bus. I reported possible undesirable guests by calling the non-emergency police line. When I described the CPS investigation and said I would have a patrol car drive by 11:55 at noon, the officer seemed understanding. Gerald's SUV arrived in my driveway as promised. They marched up to my door, and I observed from the front window. Barbara's expression was determined. When they discovered that their key would not fit the new lock, Gerald became enraged. As Gerald banged on the door, Barbara kept ringing the doorbell. I didn't open it. Rather, the first used the video doorbell to communicate. Don't come, I said. Leave my property, please. This is absurd. The camera was yelled at by Gerald. Seeing our granddaughter is a right. You have no right to remain on my property after I've asked you to go, and your granddaughter is in school. We've informed the cops. Just like clockwork, a patrol car arrived. I observed through the glass as the police casually walked up and started talking to Gerald and Barbara. Gerald made frantic gestures towards my house, his face getting redder. They eventually returned to their SUV and drove off. giving my door one more stare. The policeman softly knocked. Harper, miss. Now they're gone. Is it your intention to formally announce the situation? I ushered him in and gave him the rundown. The CPS report, the abandonment, and their appearance, even though I specifically asked not to attend. He made notes, told me they wouldn't be returning today, but said if the harassment persisted, I would want to think about getting a temporary restraining order. I sat on my couch after he went, exhausted both mentally and physically. I realized I hadn't taken my pain medicine when my eyes throbbed at the sight of my operation. In the middle of all the confusion that morning, my phone rang once more. It was Jessica, Peter's wife. This time, "What's happening, Tina?" Mom and Dad just phoned Peter sobbing and said they were removed out of your house by the cops. I let out a sigh. I specifically instructed them not to attend, and they showed up without an invitation. They were only asked to leave by the cops. You're going too far, don't you think? Jessica inquired. They made a mistake, but it put my child in risk. I cut you off. If your sons were 10 years old, would you have left them alone? Jessica paused. Well, no. However, don't expect me to put up with anything you wouldn't put up with for your own kids. I hung up and went to Facebook, where my alerts were overflowing. Barbara had posted a lengthy, self-pitying statement about being wrongfully accused of negligence and kept away from our beloved grandchild. She tagged a number of relatives who were now leaving perplexed and worried comments. Although reading her public misrepresentation of events made me physically sick, there were some insightful remarks mixed in with the condolences for Barbara. Hold on. Did you truly abandon Melody throughout Tina's hospital stay? That sounds incorrect. Did you not attend Peter's party that evening? Was Melody also present? The truth was beginning to come to light. They were trying to steer the story, but I wasn't prepared for the significant plot surprise that was developing. The family was starting to doubt their account of what had happened. 3 days later, while Melody was at school, Miss Patterson from CPS sat in my living room, completing her interview with me. There is enough evidence to support your claim of child neglect based on our investigation thus far, including our conversations with your in-laws, she stated. Going over her notes? Your in-laws have acknowledged leaving your daughter alone twice, but they maintain that it was brief and that she was secure through the whole ordeal. Now what? I inquired. Anxiety mixed with relief. The following week, we will finish our report. Even though there are no criminal charges associated with this, it will be documented in case there are any more occurrences. She stopped and gave me a close look. Have you given family counseling any thought? If you want to let them back into your lives in the future, it might be beneficial to set limits. I said, I'm not sure I do, or not in the same manner anyhow. I opened my email after she departed and saw a message from an unfamiliar lawyer. The subject line chilled me to the bone. Gerald and Barbara Miller are represented. Regarding the rights of grandparents to visit. I opened it, my hands trembling. The letter was written clearly yet formally. In order to legally seek visiting rights with Melody, Gerald and Barbara had hired legal counsel. It claimed that I was alienating them without cause, citing their deep and meaningful relationship with their granddaughter. Moving too fast still caused pain from my surgery incision. An ongoing reminder of the day my in-laws put a party ahead of my daughter's security. I sent the email to my friend Elaine, a lawyer, and asked her opinion. In a matter of minutes, she gave me a call. First, she said, don't freak out. Secondly, their hand is being overplayed. Grandparents' rights cases are notoriously hard to win, particularly when there is an active CPS neglect finding. If it comes to that, I'd be pleased to act as your representative. Thank you. My voice broke as I spoke. How they have completely turned this around is beyond me. They frequently change the story by pretending to be the victims or by refusing to take responsibility, Elaine said. However, the evidence is in your favor, Tina. Melody and I were having dinner that night when the doorbell rang. Peter was standing there by himself, looking uneasy, when I looked at the video feed. After a moment of hesitation, I opened the door. Can we have a conversation? Quietly, he asked. I opened the door for him. In the dining room, keeping an eye on Melody. I talked to the sister of Jessica. He started to sit rigidly on my couch's edge. She works as a psychologist for kids. She claimed that what Melody's parents did was completely out of place and might have caused her trauma. He combed his hair with his hand. I didn't want to think they would act in such a careless manner, nor did I. I spoke quietly. I trusted them with her care because of this. Peter appeared to be in real distress. When they arrived at my gathering, I was unaware that Melody was by herself. They explained to everyone that she wasn't with them because you had arranged for other care. I was taken aback by this fresh insight. They told the whole family lies. I'm afraid so. He turned to Melody, who was nervously observing us from the dining room. Could I talk to her? I apologized for not personally checking up on her. I nodded, and Peter and Melody had a gentle conversation for a few minutes, during which time Melody began to relax. Before departing, he looked to me again. I've instructed Mom and Dad to drop the legal threats. Jessica and I won't support them if they continue this way. His look was grim. Michael wouldn't have stood for this, and neither should we. I felt a startling lightness as I shut the door behind him. I was afraid that the family alliance was breaking up. It was because the truth was finally coming to light, not because of what I had done. I got an SMS from Barbara that evening. We must have a conversation without solicitors. The next stage of this battle appeared to be on the horizon, but I felt like I wasn't battling alone for the first time. I sat across from Gerald and Barbara in my living room a week later. My legal friend, Elaine, sat next to me, and their lawyer, Mr. Bradshaw, who had a severe appearance, sat on each side of them. Days of negotiations had resulted in a formal agreement between us at the coffee table. Since she had come into my house, Barbara had not talked to me directly. Her red-rimmed eyes were rebellious. Gerald appeared to be getting older. Somehow, the assurance that had always been a part of him significantly faded. Professionally, let's go over the terms one last time, Elaine remarked. The Millers admit that leaving Melody alone was a poor decision. Before they resume unsupervised visits with Melody, they agree to finish 3 family therapy sessions and 6 sessions of a grandparenting education program. Mr. Bradshaw gave a rigid nod. Additionally, Ms. Harper consents to allow supervised visits in the meantime and dismiss the CPS case, beginning with 2 hours at neutral venues twice a month. I verified those phrases by looking at my in-laws personally. This has nothing to do with punishment. It's about safety, Melody, and making sure that this doesn't happen again. Gerald cleared his throat. As they scribbled their signatures on the page, we will sign even if we still believe this has been exaggerated. I was relieved that the fight was over and hopeful that healing could start, but I didn't feel victorious or satisfied. When they were gone, I saw Melody sitting on her bed, with the picture of Michael she kept on her bedside table in her hand. Our grandparents are still upset with me. Her voice was small as she requested. I put my arm around her shoulders and sat next to her. Sweetheart, they were never truly angry with you. They are depressed about the state of affairs, but we will all cooperate to improve it. Will I see them again? Indeed. But for a while, things would be a little different, I told her. To ensure that everyone feels appreciated and protected, we're establishing some new guidelines. 3 months later, Melody demonstrated how to use the tablet she had received for her birthday to Gerald, while I sat on a seat in the park. Barbara sat close by and paid attention as Melody described a game she liked. Melody was called in by Peter and Jessica's boys while they played on the swings. Although challenging, the family therapy sessions were essential. Barbara and Gerald had been protective at first. However, the therapist expertly led us through discussions about respect, limits, and the trauma that Michael's death had given us all. The influence of the grandparenting classes had been much more significant. During our most recent therapy appointment, Barbara acknowledged that they had been raising Melody in the same manner as they had their sons in the 1980s, anticipating her independence, maybe too early and putting more emphasis on toughness than emotional support. We were mistaken. The phrases she had used were obviously challenging for her. The world has changed. Since children are unique, we must also be unique. A perfect reconciliation was not achieved. Tension still existed at times, instances where the resurgence of ancient patterns was threatened. However, there was advancement, genuine, significant advancement that was especially advantageous to music. Janet texted me, and my phone chimed. "How are things going?" "Better than imagined," I said with a smile. In fact, they are paying attention to her. Janet was now a member of the vast support system I had established for Melody. I had discovered the dangers of depending too much on one source of assistance. Melody now had Janet, Peter, and Jessica, my friend Elaine, and a number of other reliable adults in her life, in addition to Gerald and Barbara. I experienced a range of feelings when I saw my daughter laugh at something Gerald said. It wasn't the vengeful gratification I had previously envisioned, but rather something more worthwhile: the assurance that I had kept my kids safe while maintaining her ties to her father's side of the family. This was the definition of true triumph, making relationships healthy for all parties involved.